And welcome to Doubts Welcome, a ministry dedicated to answering your doubts, questions, and concerns about the Bible, God, and Christianity. As you can see, today we're going over John chapter 1, verse 18, the Father revealed by the Son. In our last video, we talked about how Moses and Jesus were compared in those verses and how that is a major theme throughout the Gospel of John. If you haven't seen that video, that's fine, but I would suggest going back and watching it and the other previous videos so that you have the context of this verse, because as I've said before, context is king when it comes to biblical interpretation. Now, we are going to continue this Bible study series moving on through the Gospel of John, but in those other videos, we're probably going to go over larger chunks of text simply because the theology of those texts isn't as thick as it is here in the prologue, where almost every verse has major theological points to talk about. Those verses, not so much. With that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into our text for today. No one has ever seen the Father. The one and only Son, the one who is at the Father's side, he has revealed him. Now, what's going on here in this first part? Because I don't know about you, but when I read it for the first time a long time ago, it kind of threw me for a loop, because I'd read the Old Testament and I knew that, well, Yahweh showed up at the Oaks of Mamre and had dinner with Abram right before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. I also knew that God had shown up and wrestled with Jacob right before he changed his name to Israel. And then, of course, you have the angel of the Lord and the burning bush and the column of smoke and fire, possibly the word of the Lord. So there are many different theophanies in the Old Testament. Now, if you don't know what the word theophany means, it comes from two Greek words, theos and phanerao, which mean respectively God and manifest or reveal. So it's literally God manifesting himself here on earth, that is, manifesting a physical body. But if you look at Exodus 33:20, God here tells Moses, "You cannot see my face, for no one can see me and live." Right before this, Moses had asked to see God, to see his face. And God, here in this verse, as well as the following verses, say, "I'm going to put you in a crevice over there, I'm going to cover you with my hand, I'm going to pass by you, and then remove my hand, and you can see my backside." Basically saying, you can see the after effects of my glory, but you can't see my full glory. With that in mind, then, we know that these manifestations are veiling God's glory to some point where it won't destroy those who look upon it, because if we looked upon God's full glory, we would be incredibly overwhelmed by it, and that would cause us to perish. We also, I believe, know here that all of these theophanies are actually the second person of the Trinity, that is the Son, Jesus Christ, not the Father. Now, bear in mind, when we get to heaven, it does seem like we will be able to see God in his full glory and not perish, but that's because of the cleansing of the blood of Christ and having fully taken effect at that time, and so many other things to consider. Moving on, we have another little section here, the one and only Son. Now, the one and only is something that I mentioned before. You can also translate it only begotten. It is something I want to cover in another video. If you want to hear about that sooner, then send me an email and let me know. But that's not the interesting part here. The interesting part is that there's actually a textual variant. And some old manuscripts, old Greek manuscripts, say the one and only God, or the only begotten God. Now, if you look at it from the only begotten standpoint, that makes it a bit more difficult reading, right? Because God isn't begotten. However, the second person of the Trinity is begotten, and he's God. If you remember back in verse 1, we're told the Word was God, and then the Word became flesh. So the Word, because he became flesh, is Jesus, and since the Word was God, that means Jesus is also God. So therefore, to say the only begotten God or the one and only God here is actually a natural reading. Now, how do we know which one of these was the original reading? Well, the texts that I used for this presentation, all of which are down below in the description, those that talk about it argue that the one and only God is the better original reading, because to have a scribe read only begotten Son and then change it to only begotten God doesn't make sense. But if John had written only begotten God and a scribe saw it and said, well, maybe that should be only begotten Son, that does make sense, because, as I just mentioned before, the Son is the one who is begotten. Therefore, being the more difficult reading, only begotten God, it is more likely to be the original. And really, this bookends the prologue quite well, because you have the Word being God at the beginning, and then he becomes flesh, becomes Jesus, and you have Jesus here being God at the end as well. Let's go ahead and look at the next section here. The one who is at the Father's side. At the Father's side is literally in the Father's bosom, which is a Hebrew idiom. That is a Hebrew figure of speech. Both of these talk about just how close the relationship is between the Father and the Son. And again, if you look back at verse 1, you see that the Word was with God, and that with is a very particular kind of with in Greek, meaning a face-to-face, shoulder-to-shoulder kind of relationship. Now, it is this close relationship between the Father and the Son that allows the Son to be able to do what he does in the final portion of the verse, which is he has revealed him. The word for revealed is the same Greek word that we get the technical theological term exegesis from. And for those of you who don't know what exegesis is, it means that you go to the text, which in this case is the Bible, but could be any ancient text, really, or any modern text as well, and you think of it in its context so that you understand what's actually being said. Now, I am planning on doing a video series with more detail on what I'm about to say, but I want to quickly give a summary of biblical interpretation so that you understand exegesis. First of all, you figure out what the genre of the text is. That is it meant to be historic narrative where you would take words more literally, or is it poetry where some words might be flowery or being used as imagery but aren't literal? From there, you want to try and figure out then what the original author would have meant and what the original audience would have understood. Sometimes that's through figures of speech and idioms in the historical texts, but also understanding the history behind something for, say, a poetic text that might help you make more sense of that poetry. And there are other things to look into, but I'm going to leave it there for now. So when you exegete a text, you're looking at all of what I just said and a little bit more, and trying to let the text form your ideas about what the author was trying to get across, as opposed to having your preset ideas over here and looking at the text and saying, well, this word could mean this and this word could mean that, and if you read it this way it means that, therefore my idea is right. That is called eisegesis, which is an improper way to do theology. Instead, it should be, oh, this is what this actually means, so therefore my idea is wrong over here and I need to change it. Or, of course, you could be right with your idea as well, and you could say this is proper support for my idea. Just make sure you're doing it the proper way. Later in the Gospel according to John, we will see just how Jesus does reveal the Father. As a matter of fact, in John 14, Jesus tells his disciples that if they knew him, they would know the Father, and that anyone who has seen him has seen the Father. In other passages in the New Testament, in the other Gospel accounts, Jesus talks about how he doesn't do anything without the Father's consent. Right? He's doing what the Father sent him to do, he's saying what the Father sent him to say, and he and the Father are one. They're doing the same things. The Father works on the Sabbath, he is also working on the Sabbath, and so on and so forth. All things that we will talk about as we come to them in those Bible studies. But for now, that is a wrap on the prologue to the Gospel according to John. I hope you liked it. If you did like it, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below, let me know what you thought, anything that might help me do better videos for you as well. If you think it'd be useful for your family, friends, and church group, please share it with them. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell notification icon so you know when I put up a new video. And as always, if you have questions about this or anything else that is related to the Bible, Christian teachings, comparing the Bible and Christianity to some other holy book or worldview, please send them to questions@doubtswelcome.com, and I will get started on videos for them as well. And remember, bring on the doubts because you are always welcomed.